see. Around 8:40. Okay, hey, welcome to OSE Can You See? This program is brought to you by the CTV Society, and it is a product of an organization called See, which has been around longer than the TV show itself, which has been around quite a while. And my name is Mark Zapotowski. I'm a member over here. Stephen Durst, my co-panelist tonight, he's a member of CTV or See, and tonight we're going to be talking about class war in American society, the youth vote, and the Hunger Games. And that's because I think you have to say that in American media over the past decade and a half or so, you often find that elites, Wall Street types, rich people, the boss is really very often the bad person. And there's elites are in the popular imagination out to get you as the common person and betray your trust and make your day really bad and everything. And the Hunger Games is much like that too. And people wonder why it is that Bernie Sanders has ignited so much of the youth, and I find it interesting that the Hunger Games is an example of this sort of literature, but of course, kind of youth literature. In the Hunger Games, you have an elite that's very off on its hedonistic experience of luxury and privilege, and they kind of celebrate the fact that they vampirize the rest of what used to be the United States from their capital, which I assume is Salt Lake City. Sometime in the future, after some horrible civil war in which very fascistic capitalist forces took ultimate control. Then there was a rebellion, and then they really took control and started making the districts give up their children to kill each other in some kind of entertainment contest where they kill each other off until there's only one person, and then they go around and they join a kind of celebrity sphere verse. In many ways, it seems to be a reflection of our sort of infotainment complex that seems now really passé. And in this film, it seems to ridicule that whole entertainment verse, the celebrity verse, and because the common people, the formerly affluent citizens of the United States and their various districts have been depopulated and reduced to poverty circumstances. In fact, they're hungry. And so Hunger Games, hunger's become a game, this thing's a game, everything's a game. And we're gonna go into our first roll-in of that. We'll come back with our fellow panelists here, Stephen Durst, and we'll start relating to the larger society from the Hunger Games and why we think the youth vote is so Bernie and so anti-establishment. If we could go ahead with the first of those. We're not ready with that.
It's not ready yet. About the Hunger Games, it's a rigged game, and everyone knows that it's rigged. Part of the
whenever it's ready, we'll go ahead. Okay, Steve, go ahead. Sorry.
It says no rolling.
Yeah,
anyway,
but not ready.
The problem with the games, the problem with the games are rigged games, and it's an open secret that the games are rigged. Just as in our society, it has always been a rigged system. But in the Hunger Games, we see Katniss through luck and tenacity and her people skills is able to somehow overcome the rigging of the game. And when something like that happens, then it shames people who have been complicit in this rigged system. Well, we've seen rigged elections, and American elections have never been squeaky clean. But definitely since the hanging chads of 2000s, it's become worse and worse with computerized voting. For instance, in New York yesterday, once again, we get reports, besides all the other voter suppression things going on, the actual changing of votes on the machine. So if people who are voting for Bernie are finding that the screen is changing their votes to Hillary.
Well,
and we'll
and
get into a lot more of this.
We've talked about the 127,000 who were cleansed off the rolls 2 days before outright in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, 126,000 people were thrown off the voter rolls. A number of changes. The thing is terribly rigged.
Okay, of
but
course in the
now
Hunger
people
Games,
can finally see, or it's too obvious to pretend that it's not anymore.
well, in the Hunger Games, it's obvious that the districts have no power and that this is an insult, but they're expected to play along with the celebrity verse and the ha 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 of, okay, too bad you die, but that's because you're from the districts and
Right.
the capital exploits you. And I think that, very much that reflects what happened across the United States in that, elites ended up being the investment class. And progressively, since the start of the Reagan Revolution, circa 1980, it was about get government off our backs. Ultimately, it became get all the rest of society off our backs, or at least off our backs long enough to the point where they fall far enough class-wise that we can re-exploit them again. And, I think that is a game is apparent to young people in the United States these days. So many people, especially the poorer part of society in the U.S., see that school is a joke. That's why there's open rebellion almost in the schools. The bell will ring, and half the school will still be running up and down the hallways in a city like Grand Rapids for 10 minutes still before a majority of children are in the class. And
But
it's because there's no point to school because people know there's no jobs. This is the third generation
there's no way
of
for them to go to
joblessness.
college. Even if they do, they'll just end up in huge debt. They know that the police and everybody else are dirty, so what's the point of them trying to play by the rules? You don't get ahead by being a good student. And that's why Bernie's idea of tuition-free college would be so transformative, because so many kids in schools now don't apply themselves because it's like, what's the point? But if there were really a path for them to go to college, then they would. It would transform. Look at what it has done in Kalamazoo with the Kalamazoo Promise. If kids know they can go to college, they're going to work harder. It's been shown to happen.
Do we know whether or not we have that second, that number 2, the 30 seconds from the second of the Hunger Games? Is that ready at all?
So my point is, you can't have a society if you're going to have people seeing that there's no hope for them, and there's no way that they can get ahead, and that the people who are supposedly their leaders are themselves completely corrupt. And this election is exposing the deep riggings in the system. Finally, someone has stood up and said the system is rigged, and all of a sudden you can see the rigging because the people are trying to vote for Bernie Sanders, and exit polls are showing in 17 of the first primary states that the reported results were 17% off, that Bernie Sanders in every primary state actually got 7 to 17% more of the vote than is exposed here. And these are rates of disparity with exit polls that would raise red flags to any UN election observers.
Well,
corruption of the system has reached a breaking point. You cannot have a legitimate system. Even if Hillary Clinton could be elected, she would be utterly illegitimate.
Well, in 2004, there were news reports. The news report of the day, the average news report of the day on television was, there's H.W. Bush going, ooh, woe is me, I'm kind of down because the polls say we're going to lose today. And then he voted, and the exit polls were saying that, yes, he lost, and the Republicans in general had lost. And then by the end of the night, it was like, oh, the exit polls were wrong. How did this happen? And that was 2004, and that was especially in Ohio after the Diebold. The Diebold was this manufacturer of the voting machines, the computer manufacturer, and he promised at a Republican gathering that he would deliver the election to H.W. Bush. And then his machines were employed in Ohio. It came down to Ohio. And despite the exit polls, Bush Jr. won in Ohio. And it was apparent, I mean, it was clearly a rig. And that's the first time that we began to see this big split between the exit polls and the actual result. And the logic is not that there's something wrong with the exit polls. The logic is that we're moving into an era in which the elections aren't really the elections. There's some sort of rigged game.
Exactly.
And
the exit polls are a reliable metric, especially when you have a lot of them. Now, there were exit polls conducted in the Democratic primaries, but for the rest of the Democratic primaries, they won't be, because people are pointing out that the exit polls are not bearing out the official results. So, are we going to watch this, or are?
Well, I don't know if there are roll-ins, and besides that, you're talking, but there's no switching going on. I don't know what's happening here. Did John leave?
Have
or
the
what?
police invaded the?
What's going on?
booth
Did John give up on us, or what? No, we had. Durst was talking, but is anything happening? I mean, are we having any switching or any work in the control room?
Well, perhaps you
going
should talk since the camera's on you and you're talking.
on? Okay. I don't think.
Oh well, here we go.
Okay, I don't think we have. I guess we. You know, the Hunger Games thing. It was a way of tying this to a discussion about what has changed in American society, and I think that the reality is that the U.S. has become politically unstable. It's moved into a revolutionary sort of moment because the people are so dissatisfied. Societies, when they're successful and their elites are successful, they start cutting out the lower classes, and you get a more and more luxuriant and bizarre upper class. And I think that happens in the Hunger Games. It's like a caricature of what we have right now. And at the base of that, you have a growing mass of misery. And eventually, the logic is, in human society, that leads to revolt and violence and war.
Right.
And I think that the popularity of the Hunger Games is that young people are awakening to the fact that they have no future, and that more likely than not, according to the way society is moving, we're moving more into that world than the Jetsons or the Flintstones kind of world. It's no longer a world of rising expectations and a prosperous society. Really, it's a declining society being destroyed by its elite for its own benefit, not for society's benefit.
Certainly,
and that leads to war.
It's being cannibalized
Over and
by
over
its
again.
elite, and the Hunger Games shows. And I think why the Hunger Games resonates with young people and why Bernie Sanders' campaign is resonating with young people is that the Hunger Games is about a highly publicized insult to the intelligence of the people. It's meant to be both a threat, an intimidating act, but also an act of open contempt. And it's a provocation to the people to say, yes, this is how much power you have, which is none, and it's a way. And now watch it. We are going to strip you of your dignity. We're going to strip you of your rights, and we're going to make you watch it.
We're going to make you watch it, and even if you win the game, we're going to force you to smile and play the part of our celebrity guest star, even though it was all about murdering people.
Right.
And pretend like it was all normal. That's a further insult because everyone knows it's not normal. Everyone in the U.S. knows that the growing mass of society is increasingly impoverished and in an increasingly desperate situation. And this election, now especially inside the city of New York, shows you how blatant the oppressors are. They're telling you you can't vote for someone who calls themselves a socialist, despite the Constitution, despite the pretense that you had a choice, they're trying to say that no, you don't have a choice. So what is that but provocation to war here in the United States?
Because
that's the abrogation of the Constitution of the United States by elite forces within the Democratic Party.
Right, isn't that ironic?
More liberal and more democratic. We always thought, you and I and our friends, that such a threat would come from the right, but here it is from the left.
It's
leftishness. You know,
it's ironic. Well, of course, that began with the Clintons and the Democratic Leadership Council taking the Democratic Party and making it Wall Street friendly, so that the Democrats could compete with the Republicans in taking money. Well, they've become the more reliable vessel for doing the bidding of the globalizing hegemons. The banks are getting a lot more done with people like Obama, who will take liberal social stands, but when it comes to something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is still, or drone warfare, or any number of things that they really care about. So they get TPP and we get gay marriage, because the identity politics of the Democratic Party makes them the reliable cover. As Bill Clinton was able to do all the things that the first Bush and Reagan wanted to do, because he could say, well, I'm a liberal and I'm on your side, but we need NAFTA. I'm still on your side, but we need a little NAFTA here too.
Well,
I'll put gays in the military, but you got to have NAFTA. So
right. I think that so much of the liberal left has been deluded into thinking that real progress is made and is continuing to be made, even though the class war is now so hot that they're willing to abrogate an election. They're willing to violate the Constitution more flagrantly in the electoral process than it has been perhaps in
since 1876.
Years. So 140 years. So it is, it's beyond a travesty.
So here's the provocation. For a few decades, we've been going along going, all right, everyone knows the system is rigged, but it's not obviously rigged, right? But it reached a point where somebody came and he said, look, the system is rigged. He started getting enough support that he could have fixed the system, but they're going to say, all right, we're taking off the gloves. We're not even going to pretend anymore that we're not going to even pretend that this is a democracy anymore.
It's a bit similar to deciding to change the rules of the Hunger Game, where even if you survive, you have to go to the finalist and semifinalist rounds. The rules suddenly changing, overnight, and we've seen a lot of that in this election. That 2 days before an election, suddenly 127,000 people are told in Brooklyn alone that they no longer have the right to vote because somehow, things
they just disappeared
overnight,
from the voter rolls. 126,000 in the borough of Brooklyn alone.
That could mean statewide, 500,000, mostly Bernie votes, were prevented from taking place. I would not doubt that at all.
And we know that there's a class action suit that's been filed in court, and there were people who were denied the vote who actually went to a judge and got a judge's order to come back and vote. I believe that these votes are sitting to the side now, waiting for a judgment in this case concerning this entire purging of voter rolls. Now, there were purges of voter rolls in Florida in 2000 that we know about. There were purges that happened in Arizona. Now, in Arizona, the Democratic Party could blame it all on the Republicans, even though it redounded to Hillary's favor there. In Maricopa County, there were 200 polling sites as of 2012 when there was no challenge and a low voter turnout. They closed all but 60 of those and didn't tell people they were closed, didn't tell them where they would be. Here in New York, the Democratic Party sent out letters telling people the wrong days to vote on. They moved polling places and they changed the voting time from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. to noon to 9 p.m., but only in the areas of the state where Bernie was expected to do well. There were numerous reports, not just of votes being changed on the machines, but of
Yeah, come on.
of people being denied ballots. They would come and say, I'm a Democrat, and they say, well, we don't have any Democratic ballots, here's a Republican ballot. It's like they're not even trying to pretend like they're going to have a fair election. So we should talk about democracy awakening and democracy spring. The media is not covering this story, but over 1,400 people have been arrested in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol over the last 10 days. A march began on April 2nd from Philadelphia. They marched on Washington, and there have been arrests every day, and in the last few days, it started to be arrests of so-called well-known, important people. For instance, Ben and Jerry themselves.
One of the Young Turks got arrested?
Oh yeah, Cenk Uygur got arrested. The president of the NAACP got arrested in his full clerical vestments. The Statue of Liberty got arrested. That's become an iconic image around the internet, and yet the media is barely touching it. There is we don't have any roll-ins, but I do have some newspaper clippings up there that they can show. One is from USA Today that reports 900 arrests as of Saturday. I don't know what it is as of last night. It was 1,400 people had been arrested. And this is a ongoing protest demanding fair elections, money out of politics. And so this is a revolutionary moment, and it's not being televised, but
No.
we have an internet that's allowing people to...
You know, the thing about the Hunger Games, I think that one of the things that's interesting is the way it portrays a kind of a reflection of media and ordinary life of an average person sort of dichotomy that we're actually losing already. I mean, it's like it's a portrayal of something that's already passing. And in its ridiculousness, the weird hairdos and the
Right.
bizarrely bright colors and the caricature nature of the people in the Capitol reflects a kind of celebrity, sort of gossipy, sort of trivialization and celebration of meaningless wealth by people who are elites lording it over the non-elites that is already something that seems a part of a past world because of the internet. People aren't focused on the celebrity world or the real BS, fecal matter world of the normal pablum news media feed that people get. And the way that it doesn't really cover Bernie or really what's happening to society or many serious events in society shows you that it really has served a propaganda purpose. And because of the YouTube-verse and the blogosphere and people selecting their own frame of consciousness, they've suddenly gotten this whole cartoon celebrity mind control infotainment complex in their own rearview mirror now, and they're going away from it. So that's why it's one of the reasons that it's a revolutionary moment. The other thing is that the distance between the affluent or the supposedly normal upper middle class and all the rest of society, increasingly as a proportion, is so vast now that so many things are at the breaking point. Trump is a definite symptom of that because he's speaking to the same economic issues, essentially, in many ways, that even Bernie is. And then they both point to the same financial elites as, the enemy of the American people. And the American people have found these two candidates have found more excitement for them than for anyone else. And that it leads to this moment where, the poker hand is tipped by the Hillary Clinton elitists, and they're showing, yes, we can be fascists, and look what we can do. We can deny you an election. We can deny hundreds of thousands of people the right to vote because in your face, mother.
Well,
Yeah.
over 3 million in New Yorker were denied the right to vote just because they were registered as independents. Now, the Constitution doesn't say anything about political parties. It doesn't say anything about giving political
right.
parties the power to run elections. But with political parties running elections, what we have seen is a way of distancing people from their democratic destiny, to the point that these parties have absolutely destroyed themselves. After this year, the Republicans and the Democrats will no longer be able to carry on with the charade that they've been doing for so long.
I still think this is essentially a constitutional crisis. Even though the parties are not part of the Constitution, they are regulated by law, and their activities are regulated by law. It's as if this were this is constitutional material in the British sense of the unwritten Constitution.
Right.
But much of it is encoded actually as law.
Right.
So it's a crisis, and this is a crisis unlike anything that we've seen in our lifetime, and I would include 9/11, simply because this, rather than killing 3,000 people, you're denying the right of hundreds of thousands of people to their own governance,
and
which is
when they do that, what they're doing is undermining the legitimacy of a system that had very slim legitimacy up till now. That's legitimacy mainly amounted to the complicity of people and thinking that it wasn't that bad. We're still the greatest country on earth.
It's very hard to say now, especially when something like this happens. But also, especially when your kids, are on heroin because it's cheaper than the OxyContin that they used to get out of your medicine chest. Yeah. And you haven't had a real job in, a decade, and, your wife is contemplating suicide, and you're living in middle America someplace, and you hear that story over and over again, and it's true. If you go north of here in Michigan, you find a landscape of farms that have become abandoned. The world has returned to nature. But it's because the small towns and the farms have dried up. And this is similar throughout large stretches of America. The factory that was the anchor of employment plus went down in the small town, and then the farms around it dried up also, and you see this over and over again. That's why bears come into Grand Rapids now, because the countryside has returned to wilderness.
Well, since Reagan, the family farm has obviously been shrinking, and companies like Monsanto and ADM have pretty much taken over the food supply. And for decades, it's been a slow immiseration of people and a way of making them feel that it's their own fault, that somehow as losers in this world, they're to blame themselves. Well, now it's reached a point where it looks like they want to provoke an absolute the very elites seem to be provoking this crisis so that they can use their militarized police to simply crush any of the old versions of democracy. And I'll tell you what, if Reagan or if Hillary is elected, I don't think you're going to see the kind of open Wild West internet you have right now.
No,
I think net neutrality will be gone, and we can talk about that. And we should take some phone calls on that.
We're open to telephone calls. This is OSE Can You See, which comes to you the first, the third, and fifth Wednesday of every month, brought to you by the CTV Society. Tonight we're talking about what is happening in the U.S. Elections, in the primary elections, especially on the Democratic side, especially in New York, what just happened, constitutional crisis there. And we're joined by Martha Cooper, one of our fellow members of the CTV Society. And Martha, do you have anything that you're just really burning to tell us about in terms of the...
Well, yes, I actually have been just antsy listening to you. We are talking about the politics, but if we rewind even just, say 10, 20 years, a couple of presidents, we've seen that a lot of Democrats are really disgusted with the Democratic Party, and that was even before this election season and Bernie Sanders' name was ever mentioned, because they knew that they were not standing up for unions and workers' rights. And they knew when it was a Democratic president who signed away any kind of protections in the banking system between the people that worked hard and saved their money and the people who were gambling with other people's money. So things have happened, and people have had to live through this. One of the things I think about was just speaking for myself. We had the housing market crash. At that time, I was somebody's job. I know it's a little bit personal, but I'm a person, and I found out that it wasn't me. It was the way this situation, it is a rigged game. It was rigged before politics even came along this time. We had a housing market crash, so you had all these people that had been told, you can buy a house. And I remember at that same time, there were all of these credit cards being dumped in your mailbox. You can have a credit card. You have already been approved. They did not care that you went into debt. Maybe you needed a couple of tires and you said, okay, I'll do the credit card. You're hooked. They were doing everything they could to hook people economically to make them be in debt. Saying, oh, you'll be better off in 5 years and you'll be able to handle that balloon payment. Well, as soon after the housing market crashed and I couldn't get a job enough to pay my rent, I remember there was a guy trying to sell me a house. I couldn't afford a house and I knew it, but he would have sold me it and he would have made the money and I would have been not only out on the street, which I wound up being because I couldn't paint anything. So then everybody loses their retirements. These were people that were doing the right thing.
And when they lose their retirements, when they lose their house investment, when they lose their stock value and they have to sell for what they can get, someone else ends up with this property and this real property.
But this is
That's
investors, not necessarily people. Okay, so what also there's things going on all at once. One of the things I was really thinking about was what they try to do in this game is knock people out of the game. And one of the ways we do that is the drug war. Okay, we've got all these prisons. These are guys that don't have jobs and they became somebody's job. And somebody's making money as if they were producing widgets. Okay?
Well,
but they are working, and they're working for extremely rich companies.
Like Victoria's Secret.
And so we knock these people out. Well, then we don't have enough for just blacks in the crack epidemic. Along comes all the country people. They lost their farms and their jobs, and now they're doing meth, and so now they're in there. And this is the first politician that spoke about the drug war.
Hey, Rick, are you there, Rick? Are you still there?
He's going after all of the things. There are many things where we've had this rigged game.
Yes, Rick, thank you for calling, Rick. Your question, your comment, go ahead, Rick.
First of all, you know whose birthday it is today?
I can't hear you, Rick. They have to do something in there so that we can hear you. You're not loud enough at all for me to hear you.
Can you hear me?
I don't hear anything.
Can't hear you, Rick.
Hello?
That's too bad. Why isn't it working? Do we know?
Hello?
Oh, I can hear you. Oh, no, hey, Rick.
Quiet.
Rick?
You can hear me now?
I can.
Okay, do you know whose birthday it is today?
It's Adolf Hitler's birthday. I'm sorry that you remembered it. Yes.
Well, anyway, I think it's interesting what's going on in the both parties right now. There's a lot of supposedly disaffected working class whites that are voting for Trump, and apparently a lot of black people are voting for Hillary, and it's unclear to me why either one of those groups is doing that. I think that what's happened, I think, is that in the case of Hillary, for instance, even though I think you three would agree with me that she's bad news as far as economics are concerned. You know, she's going to be to the right of Obama, not only to the right of Bernie, but to the right of Obama on economic policy, probably more like her husband, you know, who implemented such things as NAFTA.
Yeah, an internationalist and a person who makes sure that the continued bleeding out of the American economy into the globalized economy continues to happen.
And they're making tons of money off the drug war all around the world.
And continue, please.
Well, I think that someone on WPRR radio, I don't know if you folks ever listen to that, it's 1680 AM.
Yeah.
there's a fellow on there that says, well, the people voting for Hillary, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, he says, well, we're going to get screwed on economic issues, but if you vote for Hillary, at least lesbians will be able to adopt little puppies. And I think
that's what I was saying.
Were they saying this seriously or facetiously?
Well, no, I think his point is you have all these social issues like affirmative action and abortion and things like that.
That's how
I
the
agree.
Clintons sold themselves in the first place.
I agree.
They said, we will give Wall Street what it wants, but we'll give the lefties, we'll give them the social thing.
But see, in the meantime, of course, I'm sure that you agree that the house is actually on fire. The house of our society is on fire because of what's happening to most of the people. And if we have freedom for all sorts of multisexual people to be able to go into the bathroom of their choice in Georgia, doesn't really matter that much by comparison to what's really happening to society, and that is progressive impoverishment, the loss of our freedom to apparently select our own governance, as we see in New York, with hundreds of thousands of people.
If you're a guy like George
disenfranchised
Clooney, who, when he had that fundraiser for Hillary, admitted that the amount of money raised was obscene, but he's still engaged in it. Now, a guy like George Clooney has got so much money, he's never going to have to worry about economic issues, so he can worry about these social issues because he's never going to have to worry where his next meal is coming from or losing his home.
These issues, these various splinter issues on the left that are very common, where you have, a scroll, 3 feet long of all the endorsing groups that have joined some cause. By the time you do that, you've lost your focus, and you're already being sent off in a direction that your opponents really love, because when you lose your focus, you lose your punch, and you're easily dissipated and defeated. And then they all run home sort of sobbing and going, "Ooh, we didn't accomplish our objectives."
What do you think of Democracy Spring? That seems to be refocusing on the elections itself. Free and fair elections, 1,400 people so far as I know. Probably more by now arrested in Washington, D.C.
Well, I've never been a big fan of street theater, either on the left or the right. I think that people have to be mobilized to vote. I think the only way you can have a revolution which is somewhat nonviolent is to get the police forces and the military on the side of the working class, and that way we can overthrow all of these people, these corporate leftists and these corporate right-wing.
Okay.
Okay, Martha has something to respond to
I
that. We all
definitely do. My feeling about it is what they do is they say, be afraid. So when there's no jobs out there, if you're a cop and you don't like the way the other cops are acting, you don't say anything because you're afraid that you won't have a job.
Right.
If you're running, to me, what I've been seeing for a long time now is the Democratic Party is selling fear of Republicans. That's all that Hillary offered. When she came into this campaign, the only thing she had to offer, until she started seeing that her opponent had real ideas that were resonating with people who were tired of getting kicked and then stomped on.
And she started aping a lot of his rhetoric and his issues, but you know that once Hillary has it, she's not going to pursue any of that. It's a ploy to say, I can be leftist too, and
Well, what's happening on both sides is they're scaring the side. In other words, if you're a Republican and you don't like Trump or Cruz, people like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh are saying, well, the main thing is to defeat Hillary Clinton. Never mind whether you don't like Trump or Cruz.
Yeah.
And on the Democratic side, it's the same thing. Oh, you may not like Hillary, but my gosh, you got to vote for her over Trump or Cruz. And so both sides are being scared into these two candidates who, by the way, have probably the most negative percentages of any two frontrunners in our history.
The thing I've noticed about Hillary at this moment is that if Hillary is close to the power source that ended up doing what happened in New York in terms of denying hundreds of thousands of people their right to vote in that primary, people who legally should have been able to vote entirely were suddenly told, that their registration is evaporated, or you can't vote because actually you're a Republican, and they weren't a Republican. And where's your polling place? All of that means that Hillary is out there telling you that, unlike Trump, okay, my point simply is that Hillary is showing that she is fascistic. This is a fascistic thing, what she's doing. If
Well, I don't think she's
anywhere near the
personally
center
doing it,
of
but
this,
she's
or
certainly-
the people behind her are near the center of this, then that is real fascism. This is what
Right,
you would
right, I
expect in
agree, but I
Egypt,
don't-
not in the United States. And what has Trump done? Trump hasn't done anything like that yet. So it's immoral to think, oh, vote for Hillary because at least she's not Trump. She's already shown herself to be more dangerous than Trump.
Certainly more, she doesn't have the moral high ground. She can say she's a progressive, but if she doesn't,
I'm not sure that that's true, but I do think this. Let's remember, the Trumps and the Clintons were friends before all this started, and it may be just like professional wrestling. Maybe they still are. This is all just a big act.
I think the thing is that they're both on the same side, whether they're friends or not, or agree on issues or not. They are definitely in the 1%.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they think like the 1%, and the way they think is like you described the Hunger Games, which I am not familiar with, but the thing is rigged. And it's rigged that we eat each other up, and that we blame each other, and that it doesn't matter if somebody else gets hurt because we're all right.
If we're pitted against
It's
one another-
entertainment.
Okay, in the Hunger Games, there's a really strange quadrilogy of films because the thing that occurred to me, and I think it is part of it's embedded in the art of the film, is that the games themselves are a form of child abuse. These are children that they're throwing at one another. And what do we do in American society except make kids go to school and compete and go off into a no-win situation? If the people are growing up without a future, without hope, in a declining social situation, our civilization is in decline. The most classes in the United States are in decline because of this leaking away of power and affluence that is to the benefit of the elite. So that is essentially a child abuse. It's a destruction. It's a self-cannibalism of society against society.
Right. If we've got less and less room
in
at
favor
the
of the elite,
table,
momentarily.
then everybody at the table starts fighting with each other. And that's pretty much what I see happening is that they've been, and in fact, that's Trump's, everybody's been saying that Trump only exists because the Republican Party has been using that rhetoric all along.
Yeah.
And that rhetoric was like, you be mad at them because you have to pay the taxes for their medical or their food stamps. And it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're getting obscene profits and people can't make a living wage. I actually was online and saw some chat going on, and there was somebody in New York that was very upset about New York City messing up the rest of the state. And you could tell that this was a person that was in the middle class. And at one point he said, and the poor like it because they get free medical. And I sat there and thought, how do people get poor? And I almost wanted to tell this guy, guess what, guy? You're going to be next.
Absolutely.
And
We've seen that over and over again over the past 30, 40
certainly.
years.
We
And
have
more and
all-
more of society has fallen into the lower part.
And then we
These
talk
were the
about
people who used to vote
accountability.
to get government off our
So
back.
the people
got
in
the
this
economy off
country,
their back, too.
the people in this country have come to the conclusion that the game is rigged economically.
And with these
Then
peop-
they came to the conclusion a long time ago that they couldn't trust the media, which is the representative of the elite. And then they came to distrust that any authority person would be prosecuted for any crimes, whether it be a cop or a politician. If they were going to prosecute her, they could have had that damn thing done by now.
Are you
Because if it
talking
was
about
somebody
Hillary?
out here, one of us, we'd have been done 5 times over by now.
You talking about Hillary?
I don't really think they'll even
Yeah.
prosecute her until she's the nominee, because that's part of that game.
Rick, you had something else to say, Rick?
Well, I was just wondering if Martha was talking about Hillary not being, that case hadn't been wrapped up yet, about the FBI investigation.
Any kind of, look what happened to Flint. Now they came out and now they're going to prosecute today in the news a few low-level folks.
Right.
But
well, you got to
nobody,
start somewhere. That's the way you do it when you prosecute people in the mob. You go after the lower ones first.
sure, and then, instead of, the middle class is going to not only pay for somebody's food stamps, now they're going to pay for Snyder's lawyers. And it's all part of the same game.
I think that in the earlier phases of the so-called Reagan Revolution, as the economy was being leaked away In the early phases, it was just a lot of the heavy industry people were losing their jobs, and their jobs were being automated or exported to third world locations, et cetera, and they lost their benefits and all the rest of it. But then after Reagan, we go into the Clinton period, and Clinton, with the most favored nation trading treaty with China, the floodgates really opened for this kind of massive change. And now that is now 20 years and more, 25 years ago. And at this point, I think that the people who used to say, oh, we're really benefiting from this has become, it's a minority. But in this New York situation, in the current rigging of our political supposed rights to choose, we're seeing a kind of end game to the whole Reagan revolution. And I agree that a lot of it was, that's happening on the Republican Party, was the game of playing racist, the game of doing the dog whistle that only the racist can hear, and that went on with the Republicans, and they seemed to hint that they would give the racists some degree of segregation again. They seemed to hint that they were going to give the theocratists some control over secular society again, and they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to end abortion. It was never really their intention to do that, and but all that rhetoric ended up being a kind of hate signature, and they still retain that on that side. But Trump shows you that they're no longer willing to do the same let's have total free trade thing. Let's continue to let the worship of the elites mean that we give more and more over to them, including our jobs, our livelihood, the direction of society. That Trump signals an end to that. He's gone in a direction that none of these people have gone in before, and that's why the Republicans are in disarray, because he's threatening to end the whole trend toward the globalization and the increasing bloating of power and wealth by the 1% in the United States. And so he's violating the rules. On both the right and the left, there's a revolutionary momentum. Right. And that's why I think that if Hillary goes against Trump, she loses, because he gets to use all the Bernie ammunition against her, because he's against the elites, or at least his rhetoric is also. He's against the bankers. He's against the high billionaires, because he's just a low billionaire, and he identifies with the people who are trying to get their part of the pie, and he's inflaming the lower classes and promising to give them something that Bernie's also promising to do. So she would lose against him. It's just logical in this year. It's obvious.
But I just want to close by saying that I think that Bill Clinton actually screwed the working class more than Richard Nixon ever did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right,
it's
I'll
obvious.
talk to you later.
Hillary was, when she started running, she was running on his legacy. Right? Stephen, you must have something to add at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Clinton was one of the most corporate-friendly presidents of all time.
Sure.
And he did a lot of the things that Reagan and the first Bush wanted to do but couldn't do, because he had the ideological cover of being liberal. And as you were saying,
cover.
At least with Hillary, certain identity groups will be able to adopt puppies. But this is all they've been giving while they've been doing a slow crushing. And now it's reached the point where the system is so much under pressure that they're willing to show as a provocation and as a form of intimidation that they will openly steal elections to keep the power of the people from even getting a foothold now.
The districts
And the
can
truth
never
is
win.
that-
No, the odds are never on your side.
If you think about where is she taking the money? She's sitting there recently going on and on about, it wasn't such a good thing that mass incarceration as this unintended consequence.
Right.
And I'm sitting here looking at that going, how are you able to say that when you take campaign money from for-profit prisons? So,
Well, as Obama said of her, she'll say anything and change nothing.
well, and then I'll tell you, I think that the liberals and progressives, that's the words we use, were incredibly disappointed with Clinton. I don't think that we're as satisfied as we had hoped with Obama. even he came out and said, yes, money did influence me.
Yes, money
The
influence.
TPP is a perfect example of that. But, you know, he didn't do anything about mass incarceration either. He walked around pretending that he wasn't black because he wanted to kind of have this, oh, well, I just happen to be black, but I'm just as good as the white guy.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
no, just go out there and
I'll lock up as many-
represent your people. They showed up.
I'll lock up as many black people as Hillary did. I'll bomb as many Middle Eastern countries as Hillary wants me to bomb. I'll sell weapons to
He didn't
dictators.
say anything about the drug war. Come on.
I'm not going to, yeah, you know.
And this drug war doesn't just go on here, by the way. I mean, our military equipment is involved on other continents.
I'll give you a healthcare reform designed by Republicans.
We're actually at war in 14 different countries in the Middle East and Central Asia and North Africa, because that's where our drones bomb. I've heard of special forces, you know, raids, and open warfare in 14 countries. You know, at any one time. You know, it includes places like Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, you know, the list goes on.
So now Americans want to see those 28 pages about 9/11 to see if they can sue the Saudi Arabian government for funding the guys who flew the planes into the Twin Towers. And Obama's going, oh, well, wait a second. If we do that, what about all the things I'm doing right now? Well, we get our asses sued? You'd say we're drone warfare in 14 countries. How many civilians have we killed? And what if you could start suing the U.S.
How about
government?
Iraq
my
suing
sense
us
of it
for
is-
not having the weapons of mass destruction, and we went in there and, I mean, so yeah, that's a legitimate fear, frankly.
Yeah, my sense of it is that Hillary is almost like a lobbyist for drones and attacks and this ongoing war. I mean, when she was
and
Secretary of
military
State, that seemed to be all that she was
Yeah,
about.
she's a smiley, blonde-haired, blue-eyed face of
She's attacking Bernie
Bombing from
Sanders
the air,
on guns. Meanwhile, the company that everybody is that sold the gun to the Sandy Hook murderer. I mean, she made all these weapons deals.
Read it on at michigandems.com. You'll have to do that by 5 p.m. tomorrow if you'll be able to vote in the precinct caucuses, which will be coming up in May to elect the delegates to the national convention. And the importance of these second and third level caucusings, as we've seen, Bernie has been winning these consistently. He's gotten more
26
delegates.
points over several states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is something, and Bernie is asking all the supporters to do this in
Yes,
Michigan.
there
He's
is
made a
something
special appeal.
On the 28th, I don't recall what time. I think it might be 2 p.m.
You could scroll that again.
If you go to the Democratic Party site, you might find it. There is something at Henry School on the 28th, and they're going to be they want people to sign up for delegates, so I will be going to that.
Yeah, I'll be going to the 28th. Yep.
Right.
But you have to become a Democrat by tomorrow, and if you do it online, you have to have a credit card, and it's supposedly illegal, but they won't let you get past the field if you don't donate at least $1. So I sent mine in with a paper form, and it's going to cost me the 50 cents for the stamp, but I'm not giving them $1, not right now.
You've been watching OSEC NUC tonight. Among other things, we talked about the Hunger Games and how they seem to relate to our world of stolen elections here in 2016 in the United States, and American society in general. And
basically, the people being disposable.
the people being disposable, their votes not counting. How we live in a scary world that seems to be in a deep constitutional crisis, unlike anything that we've seen actually in our
Since
lifetime.
1876.
And this show comes to you the first, third, fifth Wednesday of every month, and I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully that was not the deep state making an attack against us, but we never know.
We should have a whole show on that.
I think what happened was someone in the office fell asleep and hit their head on a button.
Yeah, this show reruns 6 to 7 every Tuesday, and thanks for watching, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Yes.
Thank you.
2 weeks, is that my show?
Yes,
that
that's
hour
Stephen
go
Durst's
so
show.
Well, we'll know more by then. How many people will be arrested at the steps of the Capitol by then?
Right, yeah.
I'm really rather interested because I kept thinking, well, you know, Arizona, but New Yorkers, they're fighters, man.
Yeah, they're
I always
fighters.
expect them to get up and do some serious.
Oh yeah,
And they're not far from.
I really expect some level
Oh,
of protest or even rioting over this.
Well, there's been
Because if you
protests,
think
big
about it, if you
protests.
were, one of hundreds of thousands.